Hello guys, welcome to Redditor's Revenge. Here we post amazing revenge stories daily. And if you want more content like this, please do subscribe to the channel and stay tuned with us. Moving on to our today's story. I 31 come from a pretty narrow-minded Middle Eastern family in Lebanon. I had always dreamed of leaving Lebanon and going to live somewhere in the US or Europe, but my family was always against this. My country was going through extreme economic problems and we were living in poverty. There were so many things I wanted to do that I couldn't because we kept having money problems. My family lost a lot of the luxury we used to live in and it was affecting all of us mentally. I understood why they wouldn't let me travel, but I didn't agree with them. I couldn't travel abroad to study, so I had to wait until I could support myself and then go on my own. The thing is, unlike the US, families in the Middle East are very tightly knit, and kids don't move out of their parents' houses until they get married. So, I was stuck with my family until I could get married or make enough money by myself to travel. The years went by after I graduated and I started working. I was still living with my parents and sisters, of course, and things were getting pretty mundane. My life would mostly work and then I'd go home to my mom constantly talking to me about marriage and finding me random girls from our neighbors or distant relatives and begging me to go propose to her, and I always said no. I couldn't take it anymore when she kept making such a big deal about it to the point where I told her I wouldn't marry anyone she chooses, and if she kept pressuring me, I wouldn't marry anyone from my country. She got upset and I spent 2 years not even considering marriage at all. During this time, my dad got pretty sick and I had to constantly be around to help him. One of my sisters got married and moved out and my other sister was pretty young, so it was up to me to take care of him. This meant that I had to go out less and stay at home more, which got boring, but I cared about my dad and wanted to be there for him. One day, though, things took a completely wrong turn. I had come home from work angry only to find one of my mom's friends and her daughters at our house. As soon as I walked in, I knew where this was going. My mom sat me down and she tried to keep lightening the air, telling me that she had told her friend that I was interested in proposing to her daughter. She basically lied, and I was stuck in an extremely awkward situation. Mom's friend said that she was honored and that they agree, and even the daughter, who was around my age, kept blushing and looking at me, and I was even more furious. I couldn't take it anymore and I kept asking for a moment alone with my mom, but she kept trying to sit me down and I had had enough and raised my voice, saying that I never agreed to any of this and that my mom made this whole thing up. My mom nervously laughed and kept trying to calm the situation down, but it was reaching level 10,000 of awkwardness. She kept saying that I was joking, but I insisted that I was serious and I asked them to leave. Mom's friend got angry and embarrassed and left with her daughter, and as soon as they did, my mom exploded. She yelled at me for embarrassing her and making us look bad, and I told her it was her fault for lying, and that we went over this a million times and that it was her who put me in a bad and embarrassing position in front of them. We kept arguing and I asked her what she expected would happen. She apparently had a grand plan that I'd say yes and that the girl would come and live with us. I told her that even if I had agreed with the girl, there was no way this was happening. She kept getting angry, and I told her that I was already having a horrible day after getting fired from work. I had gotten fired for a misunderstanding between me and the boss's son, so they fired me. Mom calmed down a bit and tried to console me, but I told her that it was too late and that I would be traveling to the United States for work. I had a friend living over there who offered that I stay over at his place until I could make enough money to move out. I told her that I'd use all my savings to go and that I already had a job there. Both she and my dad kept trying to make me change my mind, and it was a massive fight. But I told them that I couldn't handle living in a country going through economic turmoil anymore and that they, as in my parents, were not helping at all. I was extremely stubborn and they couldn't get me to change my mind, so to their disapproval and disappointment, I was in the United States 2 weeks later. Once I got to the US, communication between me and my family became much worse. I was living over at my friend's place and got a very decent job as an accountant. Things were going very well for a few months and I had already got my stuff together enough that I was able to move out and rent my apartment. I got familiar with the Middle Eastern neighborhood there and my family knew that I spent most of my time there, as there were several Middle Eastern cafes and restaurants for everyone to have a familiar circle. They were relieved by the fact that most of the people I knew there were also Lebanese or Syrian or Tunisian, and that made their disliking of my decision a bit lighter. What they didn't know, however, was that I was also getting close to pretty much all social circles over there. I knew enough Arabs, yes, but most of my friends from work were also Americans or Christians or Jewish. We all got along pretty well, but I knew that my parents wouldn't be comfortable with that fact, so I left it to myself. I found out that both my parents had moved in with my sister and her husband so that they would be able to take care of my dad. But I got a bunch of flack from my sister and my cousins for leaving dad behind, and they said that I was irresponsible and ungrateful. It might have been true that it was wrong to leave him, but everything around me just made me so done with the entire country as a whole, and I was mentally doing much better in the US. After a few months, my parents kept nagging me to come and visit them, and I always kept delaying and delaying until I couldn't anymore. I promised that I would visit them the following month. I did keep one very important thing from them, though, that I had gotten engaged in the US to an American girl. I knew that this would send them into a frenzy, so I decided to keep it a surprise. A week before my visit, however, my mom called me and told me that dad was in the hospital, and that they desperately needed me to come back. She told me that my sister and her husband were unable to take care of him anymore because they had a child and can't handle all of this stress, and she begged me to come back. To be honest, I felt bad for them, and after almost a year away from them, my head had cleared up way more than before, and I realized that I was wrong to leave them in the first place, and that I missed them. It's crazy how having some time for yourself can change your perspective on something you were so angry with. Also, I knew that my experience in the US would land me a killer job back in Lebanon, especially if I have a green card for marrying an American citizen. I still didn't know how to drop this bomb on them, though, so right before traveling back home, I told my mom that I had gotten engaged and that I planned on making it a surprise. She was absolutely ecstatic and very happy for me, but she thought that the girl was Middle Eastern from the circles I stayed in the US, and I didn't dare to tell her she was American until I went back home. When I arrived back in Lebanon, I got exactly what I was expecting. I knew nobody was going to welcome me at the airport, and that I had to go to the house directly. I talked to my fiancé beforehand and told her about the different customs and what to expect. We agreed that because my dad was so sick, we would have to live in Lebanon for a while. She asked me about money in the wedding, and I told her that it's customary that the family helps with all of this and it's never just a singular effort. We arrived at my family's house and I knew that everyone, including my uncles and aunts and cousins, would be there. I went in first and got a very warm reaction from everyone, even my mom. Once my fiancé entered, though, it was dead silence. Nobody spoke, and everyone was just staring at me with eyes of complete fury. I introduced her to everyone and they gave her the most yellow smiles, and it was extremely awkward. My wife kept trying to lighten the mood and joke around, but nothing was successful. Everyone just looked angry and they couldn't even wait for her to be alone, and they started criticizing me. They asked me how I married an American and told me that they thought she was from a Middle Eastern neighborhood. Anytime she tried to talk or explain anything, they would interrupt her extremely rudely and tell her that they were talking to me. It became a loud argument, and soon enough, they directed their attention to her. They said that she was just another colonizing non-religious American, and they said the most culturally insensitive things ever. They treated her so horribly, especially my female cousins, who went up to her and kept asking her about politics and religion and the basic competition between women when they see someone who is beautiful. They kept trying to pick a fight with her for no reason, and stopping at every single word she said. It was absolute chaos, and no matter how much I tried to take control of the situation, voices became louder and louder, and I knew that if I didn't get out of there as quickly as possible, heads would start rolling. I took my fiancée aside and asked her to go stay at a hotel while I tried to calm everyone down. She left in tears from the way she was treated and left me alone with them. As soon as she left, they all quieted down and it was my turn to fight back. I kept yelling at them for how they treated her and how they embarrassed me. They didn't care, and they told me that they don't approve of the marriage. I told them that we planned on getting married and living here, but they refused and told me no way. They told me that they wouldn't pay a single penny for the wedding or the marriage, and that they wouldn't even let us live here with my parents, and that I'd have to find my place if I wanted to marry her. It was an ultimatum, but I should have known they would react that way. I left in anger and stayed over at a friend's place until I could figure out my next move. I kept trying to call my fiancée all night, but she wouldn't even respond. I got so worried to the point where I went to the nearest hotel to see if she was there and asked if there was a reservation in her name, and it turned out that there was. The hotel told her that I was waiting downstairs and that I wanted to talk to her, but she refused to see me and I had to leave the hotel. After hours upon hours, she finally picked up the phone and she was crying. She told me that she had never felt more humiliated like this in her entire life, and that she didn't want to hear from me. She told me that she would be going back to the United States on the soonest flight and hung up the phone. I had no idea what to do. I went back to my family the next day hoping that they had calmed down a bit and tried to reason with them, but there was no hope. They told me that I had brought shame and dishonor to them and that if I went through with this marriage, they wouldn't consider me part of the family anymore. Even my dad, who was very sick, looked disappointed and refused my help and told me that he can just find someone else to help him. I tried to convince them as much as possible that I did love her very much and that I just wanted everyone to be happy, but they were very stubborn and kept refusing. On the other hand, after I left, I got a call from my fiancé's parents. They told me that my fiancé had called them and told them everything, and I tried to apologize as much as possible, but they told me that it wasn't my fault. They were very critical of my parents to a degree that came off very close to racist. They told me that they understand how people in Lebanon can think that way about Americans, and that this was part of their mentality and culture. When I asked them what they meant by this, they joked around telling me that they were just kidding and looking out for their daughter. They, too, gave me an ultimatum and an offer. They told me that my fiancé wanted to break off the condition, but they have one last deal they would like to make. They told me that we can continue with the marriage, but it would have to be back in the US and that we would live there from then on. They told me that they would help me with the expenses and the wedding on the condition that I never go back to Lebanon again, and leave my parents for what they said and did to my fiancé. I got a very strange vibe out of them, and at the end, they gave me this hostile message to tell my family that's basically like, don't mess with someone stronger than you. I wasn't comfortable with the way they were talking and I told them that I'll think about it. My family then contacted me and told me that this was my last chance to break off the engagement and come to my senses. My mom also included her friend's daughter again in the ultimatum and told me that I'll break off the engagement and get married to her friend's daughter, and that this was the final say. I was tired of both sides and neither side cared what I wanted. I told my family that I would call the engagement off, but that I wouldn't agree to marry that other girl, and that I wouldn't even go back to living with them. I called my fiancé's family and told them that I don't agree with their stipulations and that I would have to call the engagement off. Once I did so, I heard a barrage of racist and stereotypical comments coming from them, and how they never wanted their daughter to marry someone like me in the first place. I had to go and meet my fiancé to tell her, and even she completely changed her attitude towards me and told me that her family was right. In the end, I was completely lost on both sides and I didn't know what to do. My family was upset at me for disobeying them, and I had lost my fiancé and her family. When I went back to talk to my family after telling them I called the engagement off, though, I was met with smiles, and their positive attitude for caring so little about my happiness rubbed me off the wrong way. I told them that I would be leaving Lebanon again, which made them upset, but I didn't care. They asked me if I would go back to the US and I told them not the US either. I told them that I had found this job offer in Japan and that I'd be going there and never coming back. Ultimately, I won nothing and lost everything. Perhaps my family was right at first, or I was too head-headed, but it just goes to show that trying to force something on anyone never comes out well for any of the parties involved. Now, this concludes our video for today, and I really felt bad for OP. He lost both his love as well as his family, but I think it's better for him to stay away from such manipulative peoples. So before you guys leave, I want to know your opinion. Do you believe that OP's family is manipulative? And did his decision to break up with his fiancée make sense? Please like and subscribe if you want to keep up with such more amazing stories.